This is one of the great weeks in New Testament reading where by the end of the week you will have read three complete books of the Bible, which is pretty impressive. So let's talk about three little books: Titus, Philemon, and Jude. Okay, Titus and Philemon finish out the personal letters of Paul to individuals. And although we don't know as much about the relationship between Paul and Titus, it is similar in some ways to what we saw with Timothy, at least in that Paul has charged Titus with the preaching of the gospel and the instructing of the churches on the island of Crete. And so Titus is there doing his thing. And in chapter 1, Paul says he left him there to do two things: to set things in order and to appoint elders. And that's one way to break down the content in the book of Titus. Chapter 2, he'll go through the various people in the church and their responsibilities towards each other. He'll talk in chapter 3 about the way that people should be handled that are causing division. And so there are instructions for living as a Christian that Titus is supposed to pass on and instruct in the church. And a huge part of that is the appointing of elders, that there would be leaders, strong leaders present in the church, leaders with the right kind of quality that can not only can provide a solid example of godly living to Christians, but also can refute actively the false teaching that he describes in chapter 1 that is going to come in. They can stand up and knowledgeably reject that false teaching and teach true doctrine. One of the themes that is emphasized in the book of Titus, I think is very powerful, is what he says in chapter 2, that the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation to all men, instructing us to deny ungodliness and to live sensibly and righteously. Because Jesus is King and because we have salvation in him, that changes who we are. It changes how we live. He'll say something similar to that in chapter 3 when he says that we have this responsibility to act in a certain way towards outsiders because of what has been done for us. So that's the message of the book of Titus. And in some ways, the message of the book of Philemon ties in very nicely with that, because Paul is appealing to Philemon to live this gospel message in a very practical and a very difficult way. Philemon is a Christian in Colossae, and he had a slave, Onesimus, and Onesimus ran away and somehow, I guess by the providence of God, came in contact with Paul and was converted by Paul. And so now Paul is sending Onesimus back as a Christian to Philemon. And he is appealing to Philemon to reconcile with Onesimus, to bring him back, to treat him as a brother, and to restore this relationship. And Paul himself leads the way in that example of the gospel by saying, if there's anything amiss, charge it to my account, which you can see the echoes of what Jesus did in Paul's language there in the book of Philemon. Okay, and then added to these two short letters of Paul, we have the book of Jude. Jude says that he is writing for the Christians to contend earnestly for the faith. Specifically, he talks about false teachers. That's really the focus of the book of Jude. And what Jude does is he chronicles story after story, reference after reference, some that we know about from Old Testament scripture, some that are a little bit mysterious to us because we don't know what he's referring to exactly. But it's clear that each of these cases is about people, even angels, that have gone beyond their realm of authority and because of selfishness and lust have opposed God's message, have opposed God's people, and in every instance, God has brought judgment upon those that are rebellious and that are perverting the truth of God for their own lust. And so the message is clear that those that are doing this in Jude's time for his audience, they will be judged. And Jude is urging his Christians to not be deceived by these false teachers, but to, as he says, abide in the love of God and stay faithful to Jesus in spite of the opposition and the deception that is coming their way. So that is Titus, Philemon, and Jude. And you can tune back in next week at this time as we begin the Gospel of Matthew in week 29. Thank you.